Dobré ráno. Dovolte mi, abych vás přivítal jménem Asociace Public Relations, jejímž jsem předsedou, a našeho partnera Newton Media na dalším semináři k měření. Tento seminář je součástí naší měřící iniciativy Measurement Initiative 2026, která poběží do konce letošního roku a pravděpodobně ještě déle. Dneska máme velmi zajímavé hosty, já za chvilku přepnu do angličtiny, aby nám rozuměla. A jenom chci říct, počítejte s tím, že vás budeme zvát na další akce, ty už budou možná víc praktický. Dneska ještě uvidíte trošku pohled ze světa a na podzim se budeme bavit o víc praktických věcech, typu jak nastavovat cíle, jak pracovat s cílovými skupinami, jak si udělat nějaký měřící framework pro vaši konkrétní situaci. Ale dneska jsme tady kvůli tomu, že nám přijel velmi vzácný host. I'm going to switch to English. So today we have Amrita Sidhu, who is the managing director of Medianet, and also she's also board member of AMEC, which is a very important global organization for PR measurement. So Amrita, come to stage. And as I said, Amrita is from Medianet, which is the media intelligence company in Australia, in Sydney. So how was your flight from Sydney to Prague? Is there a direct flight yet, or?
There isn't a direct flight yet. I wish there was a direct flight because this is one of the most beautiful cities I've been in. It would have been lovely to have just gone on one plane and gotten off, but I've come to Prague via Dublin.
Yeah, and we met there.
We met there.
And
what were we doing in Dublin?
There was this year's AMEC summit, global summit, 2 days event, all about PR measurement.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Amrita was on the stage as well at Dublin, so we are very happy that she's here today. But unfortunately, we had only 4 participants from the Czech Republic. All of them are in this room today, so that's good. And we just were thinking, or I wasn't thinking, but somebody was thinking about how to make this more available to the Czech audience. And I will invite to stage Magdalena Horanská, who is the CEO of Newton Media, and she has a big news for us.
That's true. We have all met in Dublin, and with all the PR measurement world, which was coming to Dublin, and this world will move to Prague next year, probably in May. So that's the big news. So Prague is really becoming the hotspot for PR measurement for the next year.
And it's not for the first time. Because I didn't know it was here already, so it's not for the first time, it's for the second time.
It's not actually. The AMEC summit happened to be in Prague in 2019, just before COVID. And Newton Media was the headline partner, and we are partnering again to bring the measurement to Prague.
That's fantastic. Really good. Yeah.
So we really look forward to the next May and the information the summit. We hope that many of you will join the summit. It's not cheap, I must say, but trying to have a cheap measurement is not a good way. So we will learn today how valuable measurement can be and how to prove your measurement results to your CEO and to C-level management. So Amrita, stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And I am so excited that the AMEC Summit will be coming here to Prague. That means I get to come again, I get to see you all again, and hopefully I'll be seeing you at that event too. But thank you so much for that really lovely introduction. And even bigger thank you to the association and to Newton Media for their commitment to communication excellence and their commitment to measurement excellence. It's a really important conversation that we all need to be having. So thank you, Magda, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Radak, for the opportunity to contribute my knowledge and share some guidance with you all as well. So I'm Amrita Sidhu, as you just heard, and the Managing Director of Medianet, and also a very, very proud AMEC board member. And before I tell you a little bit about Medianet and then get into the talk, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm going to start with a confession and then an observation. First up, my confession. Before Medianet, I never worked in PR and comms. Never worked in PR and comms. And I've been at Medianet 4.5, almost 5 years now. That's what my HR tells me. And while I have worked in media, those roles were across magazine, book publishing, and news media. And then I moved on to digital and the technology ecosystem, working in Singapore and working across SaaS platforms. And while the last 8 to 10 years of my career, I have been in a series of executive and business leadership roles, I found myself somehow becoming very good at sales and marketing. Now, no one wakes up one day and decides they want to be a salesperson. At least no one I know. Now, maybe someone in the room knows someone different, but no one wakes up and thinks, I want to do sales, I want to study sales. In fact, I studied finance and law. So again, very different from media in itself. But I found myself very good at sales. And if you think about it, what I was just really good at was actually building relationships. What I became very good at was articulating my own value. I became very good at listening to a client and understanding, and then being able to explain the value of what I was doing or my organization was doing back to them. Really good at being authentic. Doesn't it sound like being really good at PR and communications? Hopefully it does. To you all as well. So that's how I found myself at Medianet, with this strong sales, marketing, and partnerships background, all of which the core functions are, I think, really the same as what we try and do in PR and communications every day. Now, my confession. After joining Medianet, my observation very early on in this industry became that we are exceptional at telling other people's stories, right? We are exceptional at communicating other people's value. We craft these beautiful narratives about our own organization or about our clients. We know how to talk about reputation. We know how to make a story land with a journalist at 7 a.m. But when it comes to telling our own story, our story is a function, our story is what we're achieving, we go quiet a little bit. We're not as confident as we are telling other people's story. Maybe we fumble a little bit when someone asks us, about some results, some measurement. We provide a little bit of data maybe, but it's not quite as strong or quite as, selling as we want it to be. That is part of the reason I got involved with AMEC, and I put my hand up to, be nominated for the AMEC board, and I was very pleased to be able to contribute to the industry. I want to help change this feeling that we have in PR and communications about how we sell ourselves and how we measure the value of what we do every day. Because if you can't sell it and market what you do internally to the people at the C-suite level and stakeholders in our ecosystem, if you can't sell it, then you can't protect it. And in my opinion, right now, there's nothing more important than that. So, some detail on Medianet. You heard Radak say we're an Australian-based media intelligence company, and I want to share that because it's a little bit relevant to some of the information and the data I'm going to be telling you about today. Now, Australia is a very small market compared to Europe, yes, but we are the only Australian-owned and fully media-owned media intelligence company. We are owned by News Corporation, which, as you would know, is one of the largest media organisations in the world. We are owned by Nine, Seven West Media Group, and then Australian Community Media. So that media ownership, it gives us some unrivaled and unparalleled access into the media ecosystem for our clients and what it means for the PR services and the communication services that they take from Medianet. So we sit at this intersection of communications and media, and we are incredibly passionate. I am incredibly passionate about helping organizations understand the impact of their media success, their communication success, and their PR success. And my company does this through a range of services that we provide. We provide a media contacts distribution service. We provide smart media monitoring. We have an AMEC award-winning measurement and insight service. And we also do a series of educational, research, white paper, content, and events. So everything I'm going to share with you today, it's grounded in fact, it's grounded in research, and it's grounded in the client work that me and my team, that we live and breathe every single day. So let's get into it. Before we talk about measurement, I want to set the scene, because in my opinion, the value of PR, it does not exist in a vacuum. It exists in the context of the relationship between us, our client or our own organization, and between the media, which is very important to us. Now, Medianet, we conduct every year an annual survey of working journalists and working media professionals. And we've been doing this every year since 2019, and we have accumulated responses from more than 6,100 journalists in those years working in Australia. It's a very phenomenal bank of data, and it allows us to understand, track, and measure what is happening in the actual news media and the evolving, emerging media around it, like social media. We share this report back with those that work in the newsrooms, but we also make it available to our clients and to the PR agencies and the communications teams that we work with. So this year, we had 803 journalists respond to our survey. So that's a really strong data set. And they shared their voices in both a quant and a qual way. And I want to just share a couple of the key findings with you, because I feel that while some of this data might be a little bit surprising and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, it's very relevant to all of us and it's very useful. So let's start with the good news. The good news is 2/3 of the journalists we surveyed told us that PR and communications is important to their success, right? And press releases, for the first time since we started doing this survey in 2019, press releases have become the #1 story source in Australia, now exceeding professional and industry contacts. I think this is a really big thing. I think it's huge. I mean, yes, I know my company does press release distribution as a service, so of course I'm going to like this data point. But the time-honoured, trusted, vetted press release that we spend so much time crafting, it is needed by the news media. They have told us this as well, and you can see that in this data point. And when we analyse the open responses and the feedback that we received, we see those working in the media as telling us that the PR and the communication function, it provides access to people whose stories might not otherwise be able to be told. And I really like that sentiment that's coming through. So the relationship, it's valued, right? It's a channel that works, and that is the foundation of our value proposition. Here's where it gets a little bit perhaps uncomfortable. That value, I would say, is potentially being undermined a little bit. And I challenge, are we potentially doing it to ourselves? So 54% of journalists in Australia are now using AI in their work. And that has gone up from last year, where it was 37%. But here's the part everyone in PR and comms needs to stand up and take note about. 73% of those 800 people we surveyed told us that they receive suspected AI-generated pictures often or occasionally. Now, I'm sure no one in this room or any of your colleagues are sending out AI-generated pictures. Just in case you are, though, 78% told us that an AI-generated pitch decreases trust in PR content, and it decreases trust in communications team. That's a pretty big statistic, in my opinion. They even have a name for it. In Australia, they call it PR slop. You've heard the term AI slop, right? PR slop, that's what they tell us the name is. Mass-produced, machine-generated content, low quality, that is flooding their inbox now. So it's a real challenge for them, and it's impacting the trust factor towards PR and communications teams. And can you believe 1 in 2 tell us that they can detect machine-generated copy? So 1 in 2 say that they can tell when the press release lands in their inbox or the media release is sent to them, that they know that it's been generated by AI. I'm not sure whether you all know when content is being generated by AI. Sometimes for me it's hard to tell, but 1 in 2 journalists in Australia say that that's what's happening for them. Now, here is the opportunity for us. Those of us that can stay human, that can stay relevant, right? Stay strategic. This has never been bigger in this kind of ecosystem that's happening. Only if we can prove it though. Easy you say, Amrita, how do you prove it? But that's the question. It's not, is PR valuable? We all know it is. We've just heard the media tell us that PR is valuable. So we know PR is valuable. It comes down to how do we measure that value in a way that the C-suite, in the way that our colleagues understand, believe, and then fund through their budget, because ultimately that's a really important outcome we're seeking. So I want to take you through 2 core things today, okay? The first is how to measure PR impact effectively. And then secondly is how to sell and promote the value of that PR. In talking about measuring effectively, I want to talk about a concept I've been really thinking about a lot recently, and it's a concept of mirrors. A little bit inspired by the Snow White fairy tale, and I'm sure you all know this fairy tale as well. The first mirror that most of us look at, ourselves, for our organization, and for our clients, it's the mirror right in front of us, right? It's the one showing our own reflection. And what do we look at in this mirror? We look at things like volume. We look at things like reach, which is highly inflated at times. We all know this. We look at things like sentiment, basic sentiment, which is open to subjectivity and disagreement. The classic vanity metrics. Now, I'm not going to tell you that they don't matter. When you are at the early stages of your measurement journey, these do matter. They are a starting point, but they are not your final destination. And it's okay, because vanity does feel a little bit like success. We have all had that rush. I have been there with you, right? When a piece of coverage lands, when you get great media pickup on behalf of your client, you feel fantastic, right? You get that little dopamine hit, you get very excited, you walk around and you show this to the team. And our leadership teams, they feel that excitement and that rush too, when it's just that pure vanity kind of result that comes in. And that is why we, as communication and PR teams, we keep feeding it to them. We keep giving it to them because it feels good. And that is okay. I think it's really important to start off by saying that. But too easily, people, organizations, teams, they fall into this trap of only looking at their own reflection and only focusing on these basic metrics. And in the AMEC framework, that is simply an output. So that gets you started, but that does not get you along this journey of selling and marketing the value of what you do. So, from Medianet's corporate communications survey report that we did of senior communication leaders that work in the corporate sector in Australia, 93% of us told us that measuring ROI for their function was important. And I'm sure everyone in this room would agree that, measuring is important. But can you believe only 13% said that they were confident enough to do so? That is such a big gap. 93% know measuring the value of what they do is important, and only 13% feel confident. So if anyone in the room feels like this, it's okay. You're not alone. A lot of people have told us that they feel the same way. And this gap is where I think the opportunity for us to develop a really strong superpower is important. But I think this gap exists because we have potentially spent too long in this mirror thinking just about ourselves. Why? Okay, when we ask communications professionals in that survey, when we ask them what they measure, these were their top answers. And you can see this on the chart here. Sentiment, reach, key message delivery. These were the top things that they were measuring. This is great, right? When we asked what their KPIs were, when we said, what are you actually being held accountable for by your, C-suite, by other stakeholders, the answers were different. They said things like influence on policy, stakeholder trust, talent attraction, sales. I'm sure you would all agree, sentiment does not measure influence on policy, right? Stakeholder trust is not measured by, something like key message delivery. So there is this gap here for all of us between what we're measuring and what we are being asked to achieve as a function. And if all we provide internally to prove our worth is data, I would say it's not the right face of our industry, of our function, if we're providing that data for data's sake with no context, no signal, no insight. It's not going to articulate our strategic value, and we really need to be, and we want to be doing that. I'm sure everyone in the room would agree with me. So you don't need to tell me the answer, but maybe I can ask you to just reflect for a moment and ask yourself honestly, with the work that you do, are you reporting just activity, which is outcomes, or are you reporting impact? And I'll leave you to think about that for a second. So the second mirror that I find in my experience working with 500 odd clients in the Australian market, the second mirror that I find most teams aren't looking at enough is the comparative mirror. So how does your work, your company's performance, your client's performance, how does it compare to competitors, to peers, to the industry, to other organisations you may benchmark yourself against? In the Snow White fairy tale, if you think about it, the queen, she's not asking only about herself. She says, who is the fairest of them all? So there's a degree of competitor analysis and benchmarking in that, isn't there already? Because without context, any metric is potentially just a number floating in space. And as I like to say, reputation only exists in context of the wider kingdom. So let me give you a real example. Please meet my client. It is the University of New South Wales. They are a major state-based university in Australia. Now, this university was established in 1949, so it's almost close to 100 years old. We feel very proud of this. And then when I'm walking around Prague on Sunday afternoon, I had the privilege to walk around, I learnt that Prague University was established in 1348. Then I felt very humbled about our University of New South Wales, and I thought, this is, 1949. And I reflected even further, and I thought Prague University is almost 3 times as old as Australia. But that's a story for another day. But this is our very important university client. It is ranked within the top 20 universities globally, and it forms part of the prestigious group of 8 universities in Australia, as we call it. And they are renowned for their focus in particular on engineering, technology, business, and scientific research faculties. So they engaged with us to conduct a significant competitor comparison and benchmarking project covering a multi-year period. Because this was a client, they were that part along in their measurement journey that understood that they had to look at quality over quantity And that value doesn't mean anything unless it was being compared to something, their peers, their competitors, even their own historical coverage. So the goal was to review their performance against 3 of their top competitors: Sydney University, Melbourne University, and another university called RMIT. So they were the other 3 universities they were very laser focused on. Now, some of the questions that this university had the courage to ask to make sure that they could articulate that business impact. They wanted to know why a particular competitor consistently outperformed them. They wanted to know what the quality of the share of voice was, not just share of voice alone. Why certain spokespeople, and universities have a lot of spokespeople, why certain spokespeople seemed to get, all the coverage. And were there any fundamental structural things in their communication function that the university could never overcome? Or were there areas where they were truly deficient? So they wanted to peel into this, and we worked with them in that regard. So a couple of the findings I wanted to share with you, which I think really speak to the importance of asking the right question when you're trying to prove your value. So our client, out of the 4, was number 3 in media volume. Okay, number 3 out of 4. That is not a good vanity metric, and it is not a good story to tell their leadership team. So that we did not want to go there. We had to move beyond this basic metric. So rather than taking that top line metric as, okay, that's it, let's work out now what to say about number 3 out of 4, we looked at the share of voice by sentiment, and we discovered another story, and a far more powerful and impactful story. University of New South Wales, our client, it was tied number 1 in favourable share of voice. So it's number 3 in a volume perspective, but it's number 1 in favourable, and 3 out of 4 in unfavourable. So that's actually very good. And the university they were most concerned with, University of Sydney, was number 1 in favourable, tied with them, but number 1 in unfavourable by a very large margin. So did University of Sydney outrank our university client in terms of pure volume, share of voice? Yes. But was it a quality share of voice? I would say no, based on that data. And the university was really empowered by this particular kind of finding. We then looked further into the spokespeople that were driving this narrative to identify a strength that this university had in their communication function that they didn't realise. Now, they thought they had 2 very prominent spokespeople, and they thought that they were the ones that were, the most impactful in terms of achieving media performance. But when we analysed it, when we really delved into the data and we scrutinised it, we identified that actually 4 out of the top 6 spokespeople in that period came from our university, from the UNSW, which was fantastic. And all 4 of them outranked the spokesperson, the leading spokesperson from their number 1 competitor, which was that University of Sydney. So this was a really strong finding that helped validate and justify the investment that they were putting into their spokespeople, the training they were giving to their spokespeople, the media opportunities that they were giving to their spokespeople. And a real call out for me was that we were able to identify for this client the opportunity to build a better relationship, a better media relationship, and achieve better media outcomes through the national broadcaster, which in Australia is called the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And the ABC, for some reason, seemed to give our client far lower coverage than other national platforms. And we were able to work out and give them some guidance and some advice on how to increase and improve that relationship with this one particular very prominent, media outlet that they had not had a strong and successful relationship with. Why? Because we discovered that while our spokespeople were strong, yes, 4 out of the top 6, the other universities had very prominent spokespeople in faculties and in areas that this university didn't have. That's that structural piece that this university could not really do anything about. If you don't have a faculty, you can't have a communication function around it. So again, they were able to go back to their leadership and say, look, this bit where we're being outperformed, let's not focus on it, because there is nothing that we can actually do in the short to mid-term to kind of address that as well. And when the client shared with us that they were using the measurement that we provided as a report to put forward a series of recommendations to the University Management Board, that was for us the perfect articulation of the value of looking at other organisations' reflections next to your own. Because this is the difference between counting pure mentions versus measuring, starting on the measuring impact journey. And hopefully you can see that through this example. Because these insights and outcomes going straight to the University Management Board, that was the moment the communications team started to really demonstrate genuine strategic value. So let's move on to another case study, and this one is a bank. It is called Westpac Banking Corporation. It is the country's oldest company. So now this one is almost 210 years old, so we're getting a little bit closer to the age of Prague University. It was originally established as the Bank of New South Wales, but is now called Westpac Bank. And it is one of the big 4 banks in Australia. So the common way we speak about these banks is we call them the big 4, and it's one of those big 4 banks. It has 13 million customers, and it has dominant market share in the home loan and retail banking space. It is also very focused on institutional lending and regional community awareness programs. They invest a lot back into the regional communities in Australia. It operates in a very unique kind of context because it might be Australia's oldest company, but it's also Australia's largest company, one of Australia's largest native companies. And there is no sector in Australia that is more scrutinised at the moment than the banking sector and the financial services sector. I'm not sure if that's the same in the Czech Republic, but it generates a lot of public and media attention. So we have been working with Westpac Bank for more than 8 years now. And through that period, we have seen a real evolution in their communications and PR team and how they have gone from measuring the success of what they do. They have gone from clip counting, and we used to do a lot of clip counting for them, and I'll be honest, to now what they start to feel is real boardroom intelligence. They needed a framework that could show to the most senior people in their organisation how they were actually moving reputation over time. So we jointly built one, delivering not just retrospective monthly reports and monthly measurement about their communication performance, but also ongoing longitudinal analysis. And that was a really strategic decision to empower their team to measure how they were moving the dial on reputation over time. And the chart on the screen here is the story that this framework was designed to tell. You can see their media impact score here. And in 2019 and in 2020, the bank's reputation was significantly impacted by a commission investigation into their conduct and a very large fine that they received. So it was an absolute impact low point for them. From 2021, they began to recover, and in the last 12 months, this bank has had the highest impact score out of all the big four banks. And the impact score is a metric that we have developed for our clients, and it's one that this bank has adopted as well. The deeper value of frameworks like this is that when you start to see signals over time, you develop insights and you see patterns that wouldn't be clear in just 1 month or 1 quarter. And we were able to work in collaboration with this bank's team and identify some clear touch points where they could elevate their communication and their media strategy and help really prove their value. So 4 kind of patterns and proactivity over multiple quarters that this bank was able to understand and then articulate and then execute. So proactive engagement was the bank's most effective sentiment lever. When their spokespeople engaged directly on particular sensitive topics, negative sentiment was consistently neutralised. That's a term we use in Australia. Even more so at the executive level. And we were able to place number 2 is we were able to place a value in particular on the power of the CEO's communications. And that really helped Westpac shape their communication channels. Their current CEO, Anthony Miller, he's the face and he leads all their conversation around the important issues that matter to the Australian public. Things like interest rates, cost of living, job cuts. And he himself consistently records the highest favourable coverage against the CEOs of the other big 4 banks and the financial services sector. So he is making measurement-led communication decisions, measurement-led CEO conversation he's doing. Thirdly, we were able to show that some risks could be planned for. What do I mean? That longitudinal data, it surfaced, the longitudinal measurement, it surfaced certain pressure points that seemed to come up quite regularly, things like parliamentary hearings, regulatory milestones, and we helped them build rapid response protocols when those events seemed to be coming up in the horizon, because we were learning from what had happened in the past, and we had the measurement and the value points to be able to help them get ahead of that and to address those. We were also able to flag broadcast as the number 1 channel needing this kind of rapid response communication strategy as well. And it allowed them to be able to take a business case up to the board for funding around increasing, their capability in building broadcast level communications. And then finally, we worked together with them to show that certain strategic narratives, they can be engineered, not assumed. Even though Westpac gets very high pure play media coverage just from a volume perspective, their message cut through, it dropped when that team was not proactive enough, my first point, right? So based on our recommendations, they proactively embedded messages when it was coming to times like the annual general meeting, the financial reporting period that they had to do, corporate social responsibility moments. They used those forums, those audiences, to proactively put messaging out there that was important messaging for their communication and their strategic function. Now, let's move on from the case studies a little bit, where hopefully I've been able to show you 2 organisations in Australia at different stages of their measurement and their value journey. Let's talk about how you sell it, because while measuring is half the battle, the other half is presenting it in a way that lands. And this is where I want to get maybe a little bit cheeky, if I may. So I was working at Australian Associated Press as the group sales director of this very large media company, and I was handed responsibility for the marketing function. Had no idea what I was doing, never been marketing. Like I said, I never studied marketing. But this was a light bulb moment for me personally. Because while I was good at packaging up and articulating myself and my own personal value, I saw a whole function all of a sudden do this at scale. Everything this marketing function was doing was polished to perfection. It was beautiful to look at. Internal presentations, reports, external facing outputs. Everything looked beautiful and easy to use. And then this function had access to all this data that they could attribute to business outcomes. So things like, leads that they had generated, pipeline converted as the result of marketing activity. Data, right, that was showing business impact. Outcomes that justified budget and that justified the financial result. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this superpower? Now, 15, 16, 17 years ago, I don't know when it was, but someone developed this term, performance marketing, that you see on stage. What a genius phrase, right? The implication that marketing is performance and that is impactful. And as a very close colleague of mine, Ed Crossan, that works at Roche Pharmaceuticals, leading their global communication function, said to me, we need to get marketing to do a job on PR. Okay? So here is a principle I have been sharing a lot with my clients and my partners in Australia. Because if you want to be taken seriously as a strategic function, you need to show up looking like one. And this is not about vanity. This is about credibility signaling, and this is about authenticity. Now, anyone who has pitched to a client, internal client, external client, I'd like to think you don't show up in a crumpled shirt, right? I mean, maybe you do, but I'd like to think that we don't do that when we're doing a pitch. We try and put our best face forward, right? So I get the absolute pleasure of doing a lot of public speaking, like I'm doing with you here on stage. And I get the pleasure of being the face of Medianet. Not once, I'm very short, not once would I consider not wearing a pair of high heels on stage. Now why? Okay? In those moments, I am doing a marketing job on myself, my knowledge, as much as I'm marketing Medianet. And wearing these heels for me, they are rather than a pair of sneakers and all of that stuff that's become very cool, for me, they represent my capability, my credibility, my polish, right? They are a core part of my value pitch to you all on stage here today. And your functional reporting, for everyone in the audience and your teams here, your functional reporting is your pitch to your leadership every single time. So a few rules for you to put your best face forward, your best high heel forward when you're packaging yourself. First up, consistency is everything. I said I always wear a pair of high heels. Your leadership team should receive measurement in a consistent format, a consistent cadence, with consistent metrics. Not a different dashboard or report, a different quarter, or because it's a different campaign, or there's been a different objective. No. Consistency. Build a house style for your reporting. Make sure it looks visually beautiful and appealing, and stick to it. Because that consistency, it signals professionalism, in my opinion. It signals you have a framework, and it helps build strategic functional trust over time. Second, less is more. Trust me, less is more. The temptation to show everything, it can be overwhelming, and to prove that you have done everything. You know, we all fall into that kind of, we all want to get sucked into that. Please resist it. The most powerful measurement reports that I have seen, in my opinion, they lead with 3, maximum 5 signals, metrics, insights. Accessible to anyone in the room, from the CEO to the finance manager to the client-facing account executive. They should be accessible to everyone. Depth, in my opinion, should be opt-in for those people that want to go deeper into the data, right? But measurement that is accessible to everyone. You beat your headline story, your internal pitch. Ideally, I would say it needs to fit into 1 or 2 pages. And 3, it's okay to mix vanity with value. Don't completely throw out the volume and the reach. Don't do that, because we have to take people on an education process. Internal teams and our leadership, they like these numbers, they're used to it, let's be honest, but changing mindsets is a journey, and you need to take them on that journey with you. So for every vanity metric that you use, pair it with a value-based metric, pair it with an insight, pair it with an outcome. Signals that show business impact. Just the way marketing does when they say ad impressions resulted in these many demos booked, and this organic traffic has had this impact on brand recognition and our net impacts, net sentiment score, you know, your CSAT score. They say number of leads has resulted in this revenue attribution through the sales pipeline. So exactly in that way. So perhaps for us, the coverage volume and then the reputational impact. Always 2 sides. Always context and insight, along with that vanity piece as well. I want to leave you with, before I wrap up, I want to leave you with one watch out. Not a deep dive today, perhaps that's one for when I'm back next year, but something that you need to have on your radar, because perhaps there's a mirror out there that you might be aware of, but you're probably not looking into right now, or looking into with as much depth and detail as perhaps other organizations are. And that is the AI mirror, because it is already reflecting your impact, your client's impact, and it's already reflecting on your reputation. So obviously I'm talking about AI, and what would be a presentation these days without at least 1 or 2 references to AI. So here we go, but we won't be doing a deep dive into it, as I said. Medianet, we conducted some pioneering Australian market research over 2 phases. The latest phase just completed in March. And we looked at trying to find some intelligence on how clients could understand and then leverage AI outputs, and in particular, the citations that the AI models are using. And we conducted that research using AMEC measurement best practice and our many years of data science to take a peek into this black box of AI, because we wanted to understand the source and sentiment of AI citations versus mainstream media, the share of AI model versus share of media voice, because they are not the same thing. And we wanted to understand campaign performance across LLMs. And what we found has some really important implications for our industry and how we think about reputation and how we place value. So I just want to share probably my top 2 findings. These Gen AI models, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google AI summaries, which were part of our research, they are increasingly where people are going to for information. We know that because we do it ourselves. Now, our research showed the largest contributor of citations across those 2 time periods was an organization's owned content. And by that, I mean your website, your owned platforms, your newsrooms, your digital newsrooms, your press release content. Sounds a lot like content that PR and communications teams produce, right? 65% of the citations in our research, and we did thousands and thousands of citations we analysed, came from this group of owned content. So that is, you know, incredibly powerful for PR and communication teams to understand. And importantly, these large language models, they have a really long memory span. Mainstream media coverage, it can last 2 to 4 weeks, and then things fade out of the news cycle because something more interesting comes up or there's some other crisis or controversy. These LLMs, they remember everything. They were surfacing reputational issues and crises from 2-3 years ago. They were surfacing details about fines. And all of that is being brought forward into how this AI is describing your organization today. It's really fascinating. And the practical implication is that the content that you're creating today, right now, that you're going to go back and you're going to do this week, it will be remembered by AI if we continue on this trajectory and this velocity, potentially remembered forever. So ask yourself, is your owned content, is your PR content, is your communication content, is it authoritative? Is it balanced? Is it reflective of how your organization or your client wants to be perceived in the future? Because the AI mirror, it's already forming a view. Now, before we perhaps move on to some questions, I want to ask you a few questions. And I'm not asking for answers. These are rhetorical questions at this point. I like to leave people with questions rather than recommendations. Because in my experience, asking the right question gets you through the hardest point, which is starting off if you're early on in your measurement journey. First up, are you reporting on activity, which is just outputs, or are you reporting on impact? When your leadership team sees measurement, do they just see a list of things that happened, a list of things that you did, or are they seeing a clear picture of what changed as a result of the work of you and your function and your teams? Are you measuring in a vacuum or with courage? Reputation, as I said, only exists in the context of the wider kingdom. So if you're not benchmarking against competitors, peers, industry, you're only getting arguably half of the picture of the impact that you're having. And half of the picture doesn't do any kind of sell job, right? Not the way that we want to. And finally, are you presenting your value the way you would PR any other strategic function or communicate about any other strategic function if asked to? Does your measurement show up consistently, confidently, cleanly? Have you put your high heels on? The journalists we surveyed, they told us that they value us. The data shows media works. The measurement frameworks exist. The research is there. What's missing, I think, in too many organizations, in too many agencies, is a communication and a PR function that has the confidence to tell that story clearly, compelling, and consistently at every level of the business. We are storytellers by profession. It's time to tell and sell our story better. Now, if anyone wants or is interested in any of the Medianet research, you can reach out to me afterwards, or you can scan this QR code. It's Australian-based research, but I think very valuable. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening today, and I'm really happy to have a discussion with you, Magda, and answer some questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting and inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
And as you said, it will be followed by a short discussion, which will be led by Magdalena Horanská, who, as I said, is the CEO of Newton Media, our partner at this event. But Magdalena is also Secretary General of organization which is called FIBEP, which is the largest media intelligence association worldwide with 130 members worldwide. So she's also very much in the international environment. So stage is yours and continue the discussion. And it's also space for your questions. So don't hesitate to ask the questions. You can ask them both in English or in Czech, because we are translated today by B, and you can see the Czech translation there on the stage, on this display.
Thank you.
Thank you, Radek. And thank you for mentioning also FIBEP. Just to mention, Amrita is not just on the board of AMEC, the Association for PR Measurement, but also closely cooperating in FIBEP, because you are also a member of FIBEP, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure always, having you on stage,
Thank you.
either moderating or speaking, because your insights are very valuable for all the community, like globally.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so for the beginning, I would like to shoot like 2 questions myself, and then I'll give you space to ask your question to Amrita. When going through your presentation, I saw one slide, less is more, right? And you were speaking about just choose 2, 3, 5 metrics to show consistently to your board, to have some continuity, and it will help you better prove your value to the board. So now the question, what data do you think resonates most with the CEOs and CFOs when defending PR budgets?
Yep. Okay, so I think that's a really good question. So a couple of things, a couple of bits of guidance, or maybe some recommendations I can give to you as well. So it's really important for any data that you present to your board or to your C-suite, it's really important that you understand what you're about to communicate to them relates to the things that are important. I'm going to speak, just like not use buzzwords, the things that are important to the C-suite. So education is a 2-way piece. I always feel it's very important to understand what matters to the C-suite. And what matters to the C-suite is what matters to the business performance, right? So it's the business objective. So the metrics that I present to my CEO and that you would present to your CEO or your chairman, they should and they would be different. That is my best practice recommendation. There might be some overlap, obviously, but I need to make sure that the reporting I'm giving relates to my business objectives and my C-suite objectives, and the reporting you're giving relates to yours. And that's why it's not a one-size-fits-all. I would say that if your report going to the C-suite is more than 2 or 3 slides or more than 2 or 3 pages, there's a high chance past the first couple of pages will not get read. And I know that sounds a little bit blunt for anyone that puts the care and the effort of a 10-page report, but in my experience, it's the first 1 or 2 pages that really count, and make it clean, digestible data. Don't just include a graph for graph's sake. And the words that go next to the graph shouldn't just say what's in the graph. It needs to tell you what it's achieving. You all know what I'm talking about because we've done it. I've done it too, These graphs show da-da-da-da-da. That's not what they want. They can work that out themselves. They sit at the C-suite for a reason, They've been through that. They've done all of that. So I would say keep it simple. Keep it to 2 or 3 pages. The metrics that matter to the C-suite, if you're giving it to the CFO, try and put something in there about potential sales or revenue or cost improvement, or the fact that to achieve this media outcome, it would have cost you $30,000 in sponsorship of a particular event, but you managed to get your CEO to be a VIP speaker and, it generated this level of media coverage instead. So try and speak to their language depending on the audience.
Thank you. So speaking about what we should do, the next question is about what we shouldn't do. So the question is, what are the biggest mistakes companies make when trying to measure PR impact? What do you think?
Biggest mistakes. I think trying to do too much. And that comes back to a little bit of that less is more. I think trying to do much and not just getting started and iterating or developing from there. I think that's a mistake that I see quite often. It's probably a mistake I have made as well, trying to do too much to get started. And then the other one, and again, I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record here, I know as well, but the other missed opportunity or mistake I see a lot of teams do is not setting clear objectives, right? You cannot measure
absolutely agree.
what you don't state, right?
Yes.
So you need to work out what it is that you are measuring, why you're measuring, what is the objective, and then you can get started in the right way. Yep.
Completely in agreement.
Yeah.
now is the time for your questions. So is there any question from the audience? If not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your interesting speech. Does it work? Oh. No. But it's a short question. I just wanted to ask you if you can be more specific about the impact metric you mentioned.
Yep. So the question was being more specific about the impact metric that we mentioned. So Medianet, we worked with a data science team to develop this impact score. We call it REAL, R-E-A-L. So we were actually having this conversation yesterday. Rather than reach alone, which, you know, like I said, sometimes can be inflated. I know there's not 13 million people in Australia that would have seen that particular media item. So, you know, that's not an accurate thing. So it's a 4-layered metric, and it does include reach, but in Australia we would call that audience, but reach because everyone understands this. But audience data sourced directly from the media, and sourced from authoritative third-party sources, not just kind of extrapolated out or made up. So reach, engagement, author authority, that's the A, so the authority of the journalist that has written about your particular brand, your organisation, your client. And the L stands for leverage of the outlet. We wanted to call it real, so we needed something for L. But really what we're talking about is the prominence of the outlet. So we decided to use the word leverage, you know, the amount of like power and prominence that outlet has in relation to the content that you're doing. Right? So it's a weighted score. So if you are just sending a very specific announcement about a particular kind of medical research, and the right publications that specialise in medical media coverage or medical PR, they pick you up, you will get a high score with them, as opposed to mainstream media where it might not be such an important story compared to everything else that's going on. So we call it real, and it's a weighted score out of 100. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the interval spans from 0 to 100,
0
right?
to 100.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
the ranking is individualized for each client, right? Of
Correct.
the journals and the
Yes,
outlets.
it's individualized for each client.
Okay.
And then if you have someone you want to benchmark through Medianet, if you have another organisation that want you to benchmark, we do provide just the top level benchmark. So Westpac's biggest competitor, we know what their real impact score is as well. That's why I was able to say to you they are consistently number 1 over the last 12 months in their impact score, because we track it for the others as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions from the audience?
Happy to answer whatever. Yeah.
Anyway, I shoot another one in that case.
Yes.
What do you think is one core principle every PR team should follow?
One core principle.
Yes.
I do really feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record and, you know, repeating myself. It really comes down to objective setting, Magda. I mean, you just have to get your objectives right first. And again, like with measurement, you don't need 10 objectives. 3 objectives would be just such a fantastic starting point, right? That is where it all kind of comes from as well. I think it's so important to get this starting point right, because it will set you on the right velocity, the right trajectory after that. So I think that for any PR and any comms team, anyone here in the room, I'd love you to just go back and even discuss with your organisation, discuss with your teams, actually, should we just get together for half an hour? Let's just make sure we all understand what our objectives are. Do we even have any? Can we agree 2 or 3 top objectives for our communication function that relate to what the business is trying to achieve as well?
Thank you. Another question. You have shared with us some examples from your company's client work. Except of those, have you ever seen successful examples of PR shifted from a cost center to a growth driver?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I would say I have seen some examples of that movement happening, you know, really well. I think that if we can find metrics and data that speak to the top half of a P&L, the revenue half of the P&L, not the cost half, I feel like those organisations are the ones that are really kind of far along in their measurement journey. There was one example that I could have talked about today, but you know I chose not to. There is a not-for-profit organisation in Australia called Uniting. It's part of the Uniting Church, and they do a lot of work with aged care, education, welfare, these kinds of things. So they really had to make that shift. It's not so much as a revenue driver as it's a business driver, and it needed to not be a big cost. And I think the way their story is very interesting, and I'm happy to talk about that with anyone offline. They were probably the most interesting example that comes to mind of an organisation that was able to do that very successfully across very high-profile issues that they were managing as well.
Great.
Yeah.
So the last call for the questions from audience. Of course, Amrita will stay here a little longer. So if you want to ask something just privately, you can do it
Absolutely.
later.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
Okay.
So,
Last question to you.
what emerging metric or signal do you think will matter most over the next 5 years? A tricky one.
Trick one.
Right.
What emerging metric or signal is going to matter the most? I'm going to say two things, if I can. I didn't get a chance to, discuss this part of it, but I think in Australia and also globally, there's something very interesting going on in the influencer space and the impact of influencers when it comes to communication and PR strategy. I know Medianet's starting to do some work in that space, and I think brands, organisations, teams should be aware of how that's going to unfold in the next 6 to 12 months and in the way we measure the impact of that as well. And then, of course, the other core piece, and I kind of touched on it then, is around AI and how AI is impacting your brand and your reputation. I don't think it's as simple as an AI visibility metric. I don't think that it's like one metric fits this and one metric for this. I think it'll be a layer and a series of different ways we measure to understand. As always, right? It's always, there's not one golden metric, otherwise we'd all be doing it, and we wouldn't be having this talk today because everyone would be doing it. So I think there is going to be a need to more effectively understand the impact AI has on our communication and our PR, but what those metrics are, I think as an industry across AMEC and FEBEP, it's our responsibility to kind of help develop that as well.
Yeah, what a nice wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita, for accepting the challenge of coming to Prague.
It was my pleasure. Yeah.
And share your knowledge.
Thank you.
And also I would like to thank you to Radek for introduction today and for your hard work with APRA and Measurement Initiative.
Yes.
I think it really matters, and I think we will continue later, right?
Yeah, we definitely will. Thank you very much, Amrita. Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your interesting questions and answer session and for your presentation as well.
Thank you.
As a follow-up, we will send you the link to this video from this presentation so you can watch it or share it with your colleagues. We will also, thanks to the B technology, which is part of Newton Media, we will share with you also the summary of today's presentation and the discussion. And as I said, we will be continuing this in the autumn. We will start with setting up the objectives. So there will be sessions, seminar, or workshop on how to set up the right objectives for your organization. We will also discuss how to work with target audience and target groups, and also how to set up your own measurement framework, how to set up your your dashboards and the measurement framework that you can use for your situations and for your organizations. So thank you.
3 to 5, right?
Yeah, only 2 pages, 3 to 5.
Only 2 pages.
Yeah.
And also for me personally, I will really think about high heels for the next time.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
I didn't
Can
know
someone
it's so,
please send me a picture of this?
I didn't know it's so important, so I
will keep an eye, don't worry.
So thank you very much, and thank you very much for paying the attention to the measurement and for coming today. And we have a small refreshment for you there, so we can continue in the discussion in the other room. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.